If you've been scrolling through endless specs, watching 1-hour top 10 videos, and still feel like you might end up with a laptop that's either a glorified desktop or a glorified tablet, this review is here to cut through the noise. I've spent the last week swapping this machine between my desk, the couch, and a friend's gaming room, and I'm finally ready to tell you whether it actually lives up to the hype. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the biggest hesitation most of us have with a high-end gaming laptop is the trade-off between raw power and everyday practicality. You want frame rates that stay above 120 frames per second in the latest AAA titles, but you also don't want a device that feels like a brick when you try to move it from your desk to the kitchen. The AORUS 17X tries to sit right in the middle of that line, and whether it succeeds depends a lot on how you plan to use it. Let's start with the core of any gaming laptop, the GPU. The RTX 4090 in this machine is the newest generation from NVIDIA, and in real-world tests it consistently hit the 140,150 frames per second range on ultra settings in titles like Cyberpunk 2077 and Microsoft Flight Simulator at the laptop's native 256/01440 resolution. That's not just a numbers game, it means you can actually turn on ray tracing, keep DLSS on performance, and still have headroom for a 240Hz monitor if you decide to connect one via the Thunderbolt 4 port. For competitive shooters, that refresh rate combined with a high refresh panel makes the visual experience feel buttery smooth, which is something you notice in the heat of a match. Now, the CPU. The i9-14900HX is basically a desktop-class chip squeezed into a 17-inch chassis. In practice, it shows its strength when you're multitasking, say, streaming Elden Ring while running OBS, Discord, and a web browser in the background. The frame rate dip was negligible, and the laptop handled encoding without stuttering. If you're a content creator who needs to edit 4K footage on the fly, those 5.8 GHz cores give you a noticeable time saver compared to a mid-range laptop that would force you to lower preview quality. But power comes with a price literally and figuratively. The 17-inch chassis is massive, weighing close to 6 kilograms, about 13 pounds. That makes it a beast to carry around, and the battery life reflects that. Even with the 99Wh pack, you'll see roughly 2 hours of gameplay before the charger is needed. If you were hoping for a laptop that could double as a daily commuter, you'll be disappointed. It's more of a stationary workstation that you can move occasionally, not a always enthusiastic device. Heat is another real-world factor that often gets glossed over in spec sheets. Under sustained load, the fans spin up loudly. Think of a high-performance desktop's cooling system, but amplified. The laptop does keep temperatures in the 80-90°C range, which is within safe limits for the components, but you'll definitely notice the acoustic footprint. In a small apartment or a shared room, the noise can be intrusive during late-night sessions. If you plan to game in a quiet environment, you might need to invest in a cooling pad or accept that the laptop will be the loudest thing in the room. Storage and memory feel more straightforward. The 2TB NVMe SSD provides ample room for a growing game library and large video projects, and the read/write speeds are on par with the fastest consumer drives available today. The 32GB of DDR5 RAM is more than enough for gaming and multitasking, but note that the RAM is soldered to the motherboard. If you ever think you'll need more than 32GB, you'll have to look at a different model or a desktop replacement. For most gamers and creators, though, that amount is already future-proof. Let's talk about the display because it's where the AORUS 17X tries to differentiate itself. A 240Hz QHD panel is a sweet spot for both competitive and immersive gaming. In fast-paced shooters like Valorant or Call of Duty, the high refresh rate translates into smoother motion and a tiny edge in reaction time. For story-driven games, the 1440p resolution combined with HDR support delivers vivid colors and crisp details without the GPU strain you'd see on a 4K screen. The downside? The panel is bright enough for most indoor settings but can struggle in direct sunlight, so you'll still want a darker room for the best visual experience. Connectivity is surprisingly generous. You get a Thunderbolt 4 port that can drive an external 4K monitor at 120 Hz, a full-sized HDMI 2.1, 3 USB-A 3.2 ports, an SD card reader, and a dedicated Ethernet jack. This means you can hook up a dual monitor setup for streaming.